Before I go any further, I will fix some of the problems that are on the curvature map. So I will select each slot, and using the smear brush and some painting, I will just smooth those problems and get rid of them. Now I will create a new texture and call it spots, because I want to draw some little points on my character and add some details. And the cool thing is that we'll be able to use the node editor as if it were some layer stack in Photoshop. So I'm creating this new texture. I will save the map and load it into the node editor by duplicating one of the image texture nodes and mix it using a mix RGB node. I will set it to multiply, and then I will use the fill brush in the UV image editor and fill this layer with pure white. Now, using the standard brush and a very light grayish color, I will be able to paint those little dots. So I try to make them as uneven as possible, and I will lay them down in a few parts of the character. This will help us to break the symmetry, and this will add some nice detail to our character. And also, by adding those on the face, he will look younger as on the reference image. Now, returning back to my original texture, I will paint the reddish area inside the mouth. So I will use the isolation tool and the fill brush or the paint brush to fill those areas. Then I will also use this isolation mode to paint into the mouth and make the transition with the outside, and do the same for the eyes. With the isolation tool, you just need to press L while hovering over a UV island on your 3D model, and then press Shift H to isolate it. It's like working in edit mode. Then I will fix some of the bugs there are on some of the maps. I believe I made those by mistaking the slot I was painting on. I will now open the node editor, select layers and click use node. I will then add an input image texture, and I will load the laser texture from the texture.com folder. I will Ctrl Shift left click it to add a viewer node and enable the backdrop. Now I will add a vector normalize, which will allow me to get a black and white texture that will have a range from 0 pure black to 1 pure white, and this will be way easier to work with. Then I can add an output composite, go into the UV image editor, check the composite, and save this picture as leather normalized. Back onto my character material, I will add an input texture image texture and load the previously created laser texture, and I will plug it into my character. So I will press Ctrl T to add texture coordinates, and I will increase the scale so that it looks thinner. So I believe a value of 50 looks nice, and I'm using the UVs as the coordinates. I will revise it to 40, and I will add a vector bump and plug this information into the ape. Then I will reduce the strength to 0.1 and plug this into the normal of my diffuse shader. Now I can control click the diffuse shader, and I can see it using the material viewport. I can see the result of this bump. It is very subtle, but that will really help us while painting. And as I didn't want it to paint all those details, using this method with the UVs and a simple texture is nice. And as our UV are pretty clean, we won't be seeing seams that easily. I will now duplicate this overlay mix RGB node, set it to overlay, sorry. Then I will plug my base mixture and I will insert our texture we just loaded. I've Ctrl-Shift-click the overlay shader so that I can see the result without any bump. And then I will add an RGB curve to be able to play a little bit with this texture and make it look better. So by pressing M here, I just mute and unmute this node to see the result with and without. I will darken it a bit by lowering the middle of the curve, and then I will lower its influence to 0.2 by changing the factor onto our overlay node, 0.3. I will also change the scale a little bit, maybe to 45 just to test. I'd like to create a way to drive this texture and be able to lower its influence on certain area of the character. To do so, I will mix it with another Mix RGB node set to the basic gray, so that whenever I will play with the influence of this, as it is overlaid on the upper node here, it will just disappear, because when you have this middle gray value overlaid, it just doesn't do anything. So now when I move it, you can see that I don't have any influence, while if I lower it, I will get full influence. I will create a new map that I will call Dragon Knight Bump Mask also. And we can work with lower resolution. We don't need for our masks to have them with a 8K map. 2K should be enough. Don't forget each time you create a new map to save it, because you will lose it if Blender crash or if you don't save any of the modification you have made. So I will set this to black, as it will be a pure mask, and then I will just paint in white the areas where I want the effect to be lowered. I now need to load this texture with the texture image texture. I will select it into our folder here, and then I will plug it into the mix. So for the time being, it's fully influencing the first slot, which is our bump map. But now in material mode, while I will be painting in white onto it, selecting the correct slot, its influence will be reduced. So I will lower its influence around the eyes and a bit on the lips and the area like this. I also want to reduce its influence on the horns and the nails.